the classical Latin alphabet. I'm going to do a series of videos on the rudiments of Latin, and so this video here will address the classical Latin alphabet. And we can see here a graphic that I drew in Inkscape, and it is a classical portico, and inscribed upon it is Abecedarium Latinum, and that simply means the Latin alphabet. And here we can see the Latin alphabet. I think you call this a frieze. I think this thing here, you call it a frieze, this square, this rectangle, and upon the frieze you can see the Latin alphabet: R, B, K, D, A, F, G, H, E, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, X, Y, Zeta. And I wrote this article, by the way. Figure 1, the Latin alphabet. The word abecedarium in English can mean an alphabet inscribed into stone. Hence, this portico with the Latin alphabet inscribed onto its frieze is a diagram of an abecedarium in the English sense of the word as well. So in English we have a lot of Latin words just brought in lock, stock and barrel. Abecedarium in Latin just means alphabet, but abecedarium in English usually means an alphabet inscribed into stone, which is what this is. It's inscribed into the frieze. Introduction. In beginning our study of the classical Latin language, we shall begin with its alphabet. We shall learn the Latin name of its letters, how these letters ought to be pronounced. The Latin word for alphabet is abecedarium. Just a footnote here, the classical Latin alphabet can also be referred to as the classical Roman alphabet. Body. Classical Latin possesses an alphabet that contains 23 letters. These letters are as follows. Here's the Latin lowercase letter. This column is for Latin lowercase letters. This column is for Latin uppercase letters. This column has the letter name in Latin. And this column is how to pronounce the letter's name in phonemic transcription. This is the International Phonetic Alphabet. And just as an aside, I don't know of anyone else who tries to teach Latin using the International Phonetic Alphabet, but I think it's a good thing to learn. So, R, it's pronounced R, long R. Bay, or bear. Bear would probably be a better pronunciation of this Latin letter. Bear, long E sound at the end. K, and in classical Latin, C is always hard. However, I don't want to mix you up with Ecclesiastical Latin. but in Ecclesiastical Latin this can sometimes turn soft. So in Classical Latin we would have in caelo et in terra with that hard C sound, but in Ecclesiastical Latin, when the C comes before slender vowels or diphthongs, it can turn soft. So in Ecclesiastical Latin this would be in cielo et in terra, and just as an aside, that AE, or in Latin A diphthong, is also pronounced differently in Ecclesiastical Latin. So caelo in Classical Latin, cielo in Ecclesiastical Latin, but don't mix your head up with Ecclesiastical Latin. It's better to learn Classical Latin first, because it's a purer, more complex form of Latin. Ecclesiastical Latin is 300 years later, and it is beginning to turn into Italian, and also there's a lot of Greek, because the Christian church started out as a Greek-speaking church. Indeed, the word Catholicos is a Greek word, Catholicos. Kata means concerning, holon means the whole of humanity. So kata holon means concerning the whole of humanity. And then if we abbreviate that kata, and because a vowel is coming next to it, holon, that T becomes a theta, so we get kata holon becomes katholon, and then you put ikos, which is adjectival, so you got katholon plus ikos, and then you get katholikos or katolikos. And so Ecclesiastical Latin, there is a lot of Greek in it, and even some grammar is Greek. I was reading, and you should read this too, the name escapes me, Collins' Introduction to Ecclesiastical Latin, but one of the difference is periphrastic tenses. There are periphrastic Greek tenses in Ecclesiastical Latin that you don't see in Classical Latin. So what I would suggest, and this is what the Cambridge Latin Reader suggests, hopefully we might do a bit of that also, but the Cambridge Latin Reader says to learn Classical Latin first and then move on to Ecclesiastical Latin. And so that's what we are going to do here. We are going to get the rudiments of Classical Latin down first, and then Ecclesiastical Latin we can maybe study that later. So here we have this letter, which is day, or de, probably would be a better pronunciation of it. Remember that long E sound. That's what macron means. Macron in Greek means long or large. So give it that. This symbol here in IPA, it looks like a colon with comprising two triangles. That means that represents long. That represents length. So here we have this vowel, and it doesn't have this length colon beside it, so it's short. It's a short pronunciation, and long vowels are pronounced twice as long as short vowels. The technical term for this is mora, mora in Latin means delay, and so the long syllables are pronounced twice as long as short syllables. And we shall indicate long syllables in IPA by using this here, the length symbol in the International Phonetic Alphabet. So back to the Abecedarium, A, F, or A, F. See how I pronounce this for twice as long as I pronounce this. A, F. There's 2 beats or 2 mori. This is 1 beat or 1 mori. This is 2 crotchets, to use a musical analogy, whereas this is 1 crotchet. So E, F, ge, and the G here is, we shall go more in depth into pronunciation in a second video, but sure, I might as well point out some of this here. Ge or G is never pronounced hard in classical Latin. It's always that g sound. It's never a j sound. And another thing, there is in Greek it's called the nasal gamma, but we have a similar phenomenon here. If this G comes before an N, then it is pronounced like NG. So an example of this is Magnus, and that's how you pronounce it. I think that Wheelock's Latin says it's like hangnail, so just watch out for the nasal gamma before the letter N. So you have this letter, it's called gay in Latin, or gay, that's probably a better pronunciation, gay. Then we have ha, and then we have e, and then we have ka, and I think that ka, it's not really used that much in Latin. It was probably borrowed from Greek, and I think the word calendarium or calendar, that's one of the few Latin words that actually uses K or K, so this isn't used that very much. Then we have L, M, N, O, and just a note for English speakers, I here am using the received pronunciation because I prefer it in my videos, but day to day I speak with an Irish accent. And a word of caution here, do not allow the received pronunciation to mess up your Latin pronunciation. This is pronounced O, like what an Irishman would say, O, O. There's no E sound there, like in the received pronunciation. An Englishman would pronounce this O, O, O. In Latin there's not O, it's O, O. So if you are from England, don't let the received pronunciation mess up your Latin. Same with the letter A. Short A is A, not A. When an Englishman says cat, you can see the E sound in there, cat. But when an Irishman says cat, he says cat, 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 and that's how you pronounce this. It's not cat, it's cat. So if you are English, I almost suggest, you know, speaking Latin with an Irish accent, because the received pronunciation can mess up quite a bit. Ku, letter ku. No, sorry. This pay or pe, pe. Ku, and I cannot roll my R's, but zh, zh, the Romans call this littera. The Romans called this littera canina, and littera canina means dog letter. It's like a dog snarling. So you know, so put that, and canina is a tooth. So it's, you know, try to roll your R's. I can't roll my R's. I can just make them kind of rough. Put a buzzing sound on it, but I cannot roll them. And so S, te, u. Just a note here, in classical Latin, U and V aren't really separate letters. U is lowercase and V is uppercase. V is essentially the uppercase version of U, but conventionally, although this is beginning to fade out a little bit, conventionally consonantal U is written as a V. So this hasn't been completely standardized yet. Although if you do the Cambridge Latin course, they are quite strict on this. They don't use a V letter for consonantal U or consonantal U. Now I have X, the letter X, and this actually counts as two letters when it comes to prosody and syllable division. E Graika, I think it might also sometimes be called upsilon, but E Graika, that means Greek I. And then this one, Zdeta, and this also counts as two letters when it comes to prosody and syllable division. Zdeta, 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 Zdeta. Table 1, the classical Latin alphabet. The diligent student will pronounce the letters of this alphabet aloud over and over again, and shall write them out over and over again until she will have committed this alphabet and the name of its letters to memory. Conclusion. In this chapter we have examined the alphabet of the classical Latin language. We have committed the knowledge that the Latin word for alphabet is abecedarium, that the Latin alphabet comprises 23 letters. Which letters comprise the Latin alphabet? The names of the Latin letters. How the names of the Latin letters are pronounced in Latin. To memory. Or now, having acquired the above listed knowledge, we can now move forth to following chapters that will treat of the pronunciation of Latin in greater detail. Endnotes. The Latin abecedarium, genitive singular, abecedarii, is a second declension neuter noun. The first four letters of the alphabet are A, B, K, D. Hence, from the first four letters of the Latin alphabet, we derive the word arbitarium. The second declension neuter nominal suffix arium, genitive singular arii, denotes a place where things are kept. Where do we keep our letters? We keep our letters in an alphabet, or in Latin in an abecedarium. Hence, etymologically, in Latin, an abecedarium can be defined as a place where we keep the Latin letters R, B, K, D, etc. And I forgot to mention this up there. Properly speaking, there is no J or J in Latin. However, one will often see this character as being employed, usually in church texts and other works composed later than the classical epoch, to denote a consonantal I or I. In Latin, I as a vowel is pronounced when short as I or E, and when long as E. In Latin, consonantal I can be represented by the IPA symbol J, Y. That IPA symbol represents Y, Y. Like German Junge, spelled with a J, Junge. The consonantal I or J, as one sometimes sees in church texts, represents the sphere J sound, the consonantal I in the Latin word jugum or jugum. Jugum, that means yoke, is pronounced as the Y in the English word yurt, as yurt. I mentioned this up here, but I'll read this out again. In classical Latin, properly U and V are the same letter. Properly, a V is nothing more than the capital form of the lowercase u. Therefore, strictly speaking, the presence of a lowercase v in a classical Latin text is an aberration. Oxford University Press wishes eventually to strike this aberration from all of its Latin publications. And I'm just wondering here, did they do this yet? I think since this was written, because this was written in 2019, but I think relatively recently Oxford University Press has released a new Latin dictionary, a new Latin lexicon, and I'm wondering, did they actually do this? Did they get rid of all the consonantal U's written as V's? This aberration from all of its Latin publications, and I wish them well with this endeavour. Hence the word verbum that one may observe in present OUP, Oxford University Press, Latin texts will eventually become verbum. However, this practice today is far from standard. I prefer this practice, and this is the practice that is employed by Peter V. Jones and Keith C. Sidwell's Reading Latin Text, Cambridge. And that's an excellent book that I hope to do a few videos on. Cambridge University Press, 1986. However, these texts, although I deem them more correct, are still in the minority. At present, in most Latin texts, a U or a U is employed to represent the letter U as a vowel, and a V or a V is employed to represent the letter U as a consonant. Hence, the letter U or U, when short, can be said to represent the phonemes or U, and when long, it can be said to represent the phoneme oo. The letter V or V can be said to represent the phoneme wa. This IPA symbol represents a consonantal U sound, wa, wa. The IPA, I think, is based on the English alphabet, so I think it's easier for an English speaker to remember it than perhaps a foreign language speaker. This will be the practice employed in the present work, although not our focus. In church texts, the letter V or V can be said to represent the phoneme V. And yes, in church Latin, this will be pronounced verbum, verbum, verbum. So in classical Latin it would be verbum, but in Ecclesiastical Latin it would be verbum. The technical name for the phoneme V is voiced. Voiced means that I think is a puff of air maybe, or something like that. Voiced labiodental fricative. Fricative because it's pronounced by making, you make friction in the labium or lip, and the dentes, which is Latin for dentes, which is Latin for teeth. So labiodental. Can you see how these two teeth go down to the bottom lip to pronounce that fricative sound? And you can see in the throat there is that puff of air, so it's voiced. Linguistics isn't the main focus of this, but it's good to use the professional linguistic terminology. Sure, why not? Okay, so I go on to explain this. It's been 2 years, I think, since I've read this. So I'm surprising myself here. The phonetics term voiced informs us that vibrating air from the vocal cords is involved in the pronunciation of V. And if you think this is down to Helen Keller, if you put your two fingers there, you can, there's a vibratory sound there. So the phonetics term labiodental informs us that both the lips and the teeth are involved in the pronunciation of V. And you can see there, these teeth go down to the bottom lip. V. The English adjective labiodental is derived from the New Latin third declension adjective labiodentalis, labiodentala, genitive singular, labiodentalis, genitive plural, labiodentalium, nominal base. I'll just type that in. Nominal base, labiodental. This New Latin word is derived from the classical Latin second declension neuter noun labium, genitive singular, labii, which means lip, and from the classical Latin third declension masculine noun dens. Just as an aside, getting into prosody, an E before an NS like that is usually long. You might think that these macra are random, and perhaps some of them are, but there is actually a pattern to where some of them are placed. And there's actually a big long Latin poem that tells you the rules, more or less, of which syllables are long and which syllables are short. But even if you don't read this poem, you will begin to see patterns of your own. So for an NS like that, the E usually becomes long. Hence, etymologically in this instance, the English adjective labiodental denotes the use of the lips and the teeth in the articulation of a phoneme. The phonetics term fricative informs us that turbulence caused by the air escaping from a narrow channel, in this instance the mouth and lips, is involved in the pronunciation of V. As with I, the Latin letter Y, or to give it its Latin name, E, Graeca, can function as a vowel or as a consonant. And when used as a vowel, sometimes it can take a macron, sometimes it can be long. Its name in Latin is E Graeca, which means Greek eye. When the character Y functions as a consonant, it is said to represent the phoneme Y, and on the occasions that Y functions as a vowel, when short, it can be said to represent the phonemes I or E, and when long, i.e. when a macron should appear above it as E, it can be said to represent the phoneme E. Okay, that's it. I think we've done a lot of work there. I'm happy with it, and I'm learning Latin by doing this as well. As Richard Feynman said, the best way to learn is to teach. So as I'm going through all this stuff, it's making it more clear in my mind. And so I'm going to try and upload quite regularly, as much as I can. Okay, bye bye.